Hi everybody, we're going to do a quick stream looking at some of the valley region creatures and organisms found in valleys, which is what we live in San Bernardino. And yeah, I'm Josh. This is my fiance Alondra. And then we have Grace, our nature expert. Expert. And then I'll be drawing what we talk about. And yeah. So, without further ado, Grace, why don't you introduce us to what we're working on today? Well, first the valleys, but...
Welcome, everybody. This is our third and final installment of our San Bernardino County series on special at-risk species of plants and animals found in our county, specifically divided into our three regions. The desert region, the mountain region, and the valley region. This final one will be about our valley region, which includes about 480 square miles of space, mostly enveloped in our inland empire. You can see a picture there from Keller Peak up in the mountains, San Bernardino Mountains, looking down toward kind of the eastern portion of the inland empire, including parts of San Bernardino County, as well as Riverside County, stretching out towards Saddleback Mountain and some of the mountain ranges just before the coast. We're going to start a little bit recapping our county. Our county is quite large. It's the largest county in the U.S., aside from what you find in Alaska. It is about 20,000 square miles, so if you were to compare that to other states or countries, that would be able to hold the state of Connecticut or Delaware. It would also be able to hold the countries of Switzerland or the Netherlands, Costa Rica, or Slovakia, are all smaller square mileage within those countries than our county. So that's fun fact. As far as people that live in our county, 3 and 4 people that live in this county actually live within 5 miles of some sort of a park. That would include local or municipal parks, regional parks, state or national parks, somewhere within about 5 miles of where they live. And that's a cool thing that we've got here. Whether you're in a desert region, a mountain region, or valley region, you should have some form of a park or outdoor space nearby that enables us to be able to get outside and explore the cool stuff we've got going on in this county. Some of these, as far as the valley region go, include our Cucamonga-Guasti Regional Park, Glen Helen Regional Park, Prado Regional Park, Santa Ana River Trail and Parkway, as well as the Ukaipa Regional Park. So fun stuff there. We're mainly going to discuss these 3 species that you saw pictures of at the beginning, and we'll show them right here.
Beautiful.
We've got an insect, a plant, and a rodent picked out for this region. Our valley region, like I said, is about 480 square miles in total. That is larger than Singapore, so if you think of the country of Singapore, that could fit just in our valley region of this county. And it hosts the majority of the residents, the people that live in this county. About 2 million people live within the bounds of the Inland Empire area. This region was initially, or formerly I should say, called the Orange Empire because of its heavy citrus history and industry that was a big thing many years ago, but you still find citrus throughout the county valley areas. It includes San Bernardino Valley and then parts of the San Gabriel Valley, Santa Mateo Canyon, Morongo Valley. It includes cities like Redlands, San Bernardino, Montclair, Chino Hills, Chino, Rancho Cucamonga, Upland, Ontario, Grand Terrace, Rialto, Fontana, Colton, Highland, Loma Linda, Muscoy, Mentone, DeBoer, Bloomington, and Ukaipa.
Brag about it.
A lot of cities kind of back to back to back in the valley, and it extends, like I said, pretty much from Ukaipa, Mentone area, all the way up to Devore and out toward Grand Terrace, and then on toward pretty much Ontario, upland, some of that area. You've got remnants of the Serrano and Cahuilla peoples, as well as any other people that lived before them. We've got, like I said, citrus and dairy, winemaking, ranching histories within this valley, and some of these still exist to this day. There are remnants of the Spanish mission system. Some of the names of these towns and cities within our county in general, but also in the valleys especially, are remnants of when the Spanish came up into California and started to develop the missions, as well as their estancias and ranchos that they kind of started along with that, and many of the Native Americans ended up at those places within the valleys. We have former stops along Route 66, so San Bernardino is one of those, and that continues on through into Ontario and on toward Los Angeles County. And then as far as our ecosystems, our water and other parts of the ecosystem, we've got several reservoirs. One of them is even in Paris Hill. If you're from San Bernardino Valley and you know about Paris Hill within San Bernardino, the city, that actually has about a 10,000 gallon reservoir in the hill. There's also Seven Oaks Reservoir that is up above kind of Redlands, Highland, Mentone area. And then we've got our Santa Ana River and the watershed system that goes with that, and that's very important for several of these species we'll be talking about. A lot of the ecosystems here are chaparral or shrublands, so you've got some of those lower lying shrubs and vegetation that are drought resistant and or fire resistant, and then you have oak woodlands and things like that as well.
Do you know on average like how big they are?
The plants or the
Yeah.
so most of the shrubs that you'll find in chaparral can be anywhere from maybe a foot or less if you're talking about some of the smaller plants or like the wildflowers specifically. Some of those don't grow super tall, but some of them can grow several feet and may even be taller than people when they're fully mature. We're going to move to our Delhi Sands flower-loving fly, since Josh has started work on that. And that is a native fly species to our Inland Empire region. It is considered endangered federally by our federal government. It does not currently have a California state designation for endangered, but that it's still endangered according to the federal government. There are only a handful, maybe, I'm trying to remember the exact number, there's only a handful or a couple handfuls of habitat spaces that these flies are found on, and those are mainly going to be limited to ecosystem habitat areas that are called Delhi Sand regions. Let me see if I can find where I've got that written down. Yes, so this is an area with fine sandy soil, and this is going to be kind of patchy in places in this valley region because of what's called suburban or urban sprawl, which means like the spreading out of urban or suburban areas, as well as development for businesses and other things industry related. Some of these habitats have kind of been encroached upon or squished smaller because of kind of the expansion of people within the region.
Do like other animals eat them, or?
Yeah, so there are some other animals that do eat them. There are also animals that kind of depend on them. So these are what's called a flagship species. So some ecosystems have species that are very important, either because they ecologically for the ecosystem they kind of hold it together. They're a predator and a prey for many of the other things. In this case, this is a species as an endangered species. It has certain protections over it that kind of protect the overall habitat, and that protects those flowers that it feeds on for nectar, as well as some of the other things that might eat it, like lizards or birds or things like that that would eat flies and other insects. It also is going to provide protection for other special species that are only found in these Delhi sand regions with this kind of fine sand around it.
Now this plant that's shown in the image, what type of plant is?
I'm not
Yes.
exactly sure what type of plant that is, but you can see it's something with nectar that is attracting this fly. If you look at it, you can tell it's a fly. Because it only has 2 wings. If you're trying to compare a fly to a bee or a wasp or something like that, flies are just going to have 2 wings. It's also got those big eyes on it, which are indicative of the fly. But it's a specific type of fly. It's a part of the giant flower-loving flies family. And these are all going to be pollinating flies that eat nectar. So in this case, you can see its tongue is sticking way out, trying to get into the nectar of one of these flowers. And that's basically what it eats as an adult, is the pollen. And
I
it's
just
got that
noticed that.
specialized tongue to be able to do that. You'll also see that type of tongue on bee flies and other flies that are
And I just noticed the
specially designed
wings.
for the nectar eating one.
The wings are so sparkly.
Yep, they've got some shine to them. Yep, these are one of the largest flies in the world, based on their being part of the giant flower-loving fly species. They are also the only fly currently on the endangered species list. So, fun fact, we've got the only fly on the endangered species list right here in the Inland Empire. Let's see. They are quick flyers. They hover over flowers. They're about an inch long or so. So if you think of most flies, they're not going to be an inch long. Let me just put that over Josh's. That's maybe about an inch, my knuckle.
It's a fly. It's a fly.
Yeah, if you see them, please don't kill them. They are endangered species protected
Kiss it.
against that sort of thing.
Yes.
They are orange-brown with black and dark brown oval spots on them, so you can kind of see a little bit of that on that one. They are mostly going to be feeding, mating, and laying eggs in the sandy soil of their habitat in the summer to early fall, so July through September. They're only, I said a handful or 2, it's about a dozen populations in San Bernardino and Riverside counties. In this county specifically, there's going to be less than that. And they're going to be only about 2 to 3% of the original habitat still remains within these valleys. A lot of it, like I said, is going to be encroached upon by development as well as agricultural use of the land that changes it over time.
I like I'm sorry, just to look at the image and everything, I like the shading of it. So, good job on that. But yes, continue, Grace, I'm sorry.
Let's see. Some people think that it looks kind of like a hummingbird when it hovers over a flower because it's got that long tongue. It kind of needs to sit in a spot and extend the tongue and try to find its target, which a lot of these insects, if they've got a long tongue, don't necessarily always get it first go. They kind of have to sit there and yep, there we go, and get the tongue into the part of the flower that holds the nectar. They are gonna lay their eggs in the sand, and those larvae will develop underground. Pretty much their whole development will be underground, and they are believed to be predaceous. We're not exactly sure, just because there are only so many of these flies, and because they're underground, it's hard to kind of follow what the larvae are doing, but they're believed to be predaceous, likely eating smaller things than them under the ground, and then they will emerge once they have metamorphosized into the full-on fly.
You see, I didn't notice the tongue until you mentioned it. I was like, oh, that is the tongue. Wow. I like the colors. Do they stay? Not do they stay, but are they just a specific color, or are they different colors?
So usually they're going to be that kind of color that you see there. They may be slightly different shades of that orange-brown, but generally they're going to have kind of an orangey-brown color to them. Those segments on the abdomen, that backside, as well as those big compound eyes that they've got on the front, and then kind of the blackish or dark brown kind of bands and spot, ovally type spots along that back.
Now you mentioned, like, obviously not, they're not like regular flies, right? So if somebody were to like touch it or anything like that, is it poisonous or anything like that?
No, so unlike some bees or wasps or things like that that are going to be pollinating flowers, and many of them have stingers, not all of them do. Flies don't really have stingers. Some flies might bite and things like that, but these ones don't have mandible, like biting, chewing parts. When they're adults, they just have that tongue for eating nectar. So they're pretty docile as far as like attacking you goes. Now that doesn't mean they're not gonna be like covered in the elements from being outside or carrying other things on their bodies, but they're not necessarily gonna be attacking you outright with biting mandibles or claws or spurs or stingers or anything like that.
Okay. Wow. Well, it looks like they're pretty big.
Yeah, they're about an inch long. If you compare that to some flies that are only maybe a quarter of an inch or smaller, they're a good size. And they've got that coloration. They're not just black or gray or kind of bluish green, so they're going to stand out a little more so. They're also likely more so going to be found around those sandy areas with a nice fine sand that has flowers that they're able to forage and get their nectar from.
How long do they hold their nectar for?
Well, it's basically their food source, so they're going to take it in, and then that's going to give them the energy they need to continue to do what they need to do, whether that be laying eggs or flying around and such for habitat, looking for a place for their eggs.
How long does it take for them to like have their babies?
Usually they're going to have those eggs within that couple month period of their being most active. So they themselves will hatch underground, they'll develop into adults. I'm not sure exactly how long that takes. I don't recall reading that previously. That could be another one of those mysteries about the larvae themselves. And then eventually they will metamorphosize, they'll change into adults, they will emerge from the sand, and then they will begin their foraging for nectar. They will mate with other flies of their species, and then they will lay eggs back into the sand. Most insects, like flies, don't necessarily live more than a year. They may only live a short time, and I believe these are also part of that category of insects that only live for a season or two and then will die, and the next generation will eventually come the next year.
So their lifespan is only about a year?
Potentially a year or less, yeah. Some insects only live within a week or less, and then some live a lot longer. If you're thinking things like honeybees, those are called perennial, so they live multi-years, or some of them live multi-years. They've got a hive kind of going that has multiple generations taking care of it. Other insects don't live that long, and aren't maintaining a colony or hive or anything like that. They may have a nest, but they only utilize it to hold their young, and then they may never actually see their young when they hatch and grow up.
Wow. I did not know that. I would have for sure thought like a couple of years or like, but it makes so much sense. Okay. Wow. And you said that it usually takes about a month for them to like have babies.
That I don't know,
Okay.
but usually they're going to be most active between kind of July, August into September, so only a couple months that they're active, and then the larvae are going to be developing probably those next several months once they've hatched. I don't know how long the eggs sit before they hatch, but they'll sit and then they'll hatch. They will collect food that they're eating underground, whether that be other insects or invertebrates or things like that, and then they will develop into a pupa. So if you think of the lifespan of a butterfly or a moth, it's kind of similar if you're thinking of the fact that there's an egg stage, a larval stage, there's a pupa stage, and then there's the adult stage. So bees, flies, beetles, most things that are considered insects, butterflies, moths, all kind of have that general aspect to their life cycle. So these will spend those first 3 segments of their lives underground, ending with the pupa. Once the pupa opens, then you've got the adult fly emerging, and that's when it will come out of the ground and start its adult life away from the ground in the nest.
Now that has me wondering, do they sleep?
That I don't know. They may have a time when they're a little less active, but I don't know that they full on sleep. They, I believe, are diurnal. They're going to be looking at those plants that are most open and providing nectar in the daytime. So they will be most active in the day. That may mean they go into kind of a dormant sleep type phase in the evening. I'm not exactly sure on that.
Because, wow. If they don't sleep, I'm like, props to you. Props to you, little fly.
Probably start to
Transition
out of this one.
Okay.
The final things for this, as I mentioned, their habitat is only at 2 to 3% of its original size, and part of that is because of encroachment by human development. Pretty much all of their land, habitat land, is owned privately by people, and so there's a constant kind of possibility that people will develop onto that land. There have been several conservation plans put out within the different counties trying to propose helping out the species, potentially even starting a captive breeding program to release some back into the habitat, having sites officially protected, but there's also been a lot of pushback by people who want to develop on the land. There have even supposedly been times when they had public meetings and people showed up with a bunch of giant fly swatters to protest.
Wow.
So it is definitely a species that has had some varying opinions on what should be done with it in its habitat land, but it's a cool species to learn about and kind of consider how we as humans affect them and maybe things we can do to protect the interests of people, but also of these species and this other species of plants and animals that all call the same habitat, those Delhi sand regions.
Wow, that's really pretty. I love that purple color. Like lavender. Is it lavender?
Yeah, it is kind of a lavender color.
That's beautiful.
So this is one of our Santa Ana River woolly star plants. They are an endangered species recognized by both the federal government and the state of California. Their scientific name is Eriastrum densifolium sanctorum. Long scientific name and long main name.
Be like lavender flower.
They're a wild flowering plant, so they're one of our wildflowers. They belong to the Riversidean alluvial fan sage scrub community, another long name. And specifically, they're going to live in kind of the floodplain for the Santa Ana River. So they're pretty much only found around the Santa Ana River area on the floodplain, so areas that have flooded before can flood when the river gets enough water in it, which sometimes it hardly looks like it has any water in it, but that's just the nature of being in an area that is slightly desert-esque. They grow anywhere from 10 to 30 inches tall on their stem.
Wow.
Height, that's about a little under a foot to a little over 2 feet, about 2.5 feet tall. They've got a woody base to them, so if you look down toward the ground part of the stem where it meets the ground, that's going to look more kind of like wood-like. They've got blue lavender flowers, you did guess that, that have tubes. So the flowers you see there, if you were to look at it, like if it were facing up toward the sky vertically, you would see a slender tube kind of coming from that. That's going to be a space probably holding nectar, and that enables things like hummingbirds or moths or things with those longer tongues, kind of like we saw with the fly, including some of those giant flower-loving flies even, that are a bit of a different species but same family of flower-loving flies from our previous species, that are going to be able to get nectar and pollinate these flowers. They've got leaves that are kind of divided. You can't really see them there, but they've got divided leaves that are found all along the stem, and they're going to bloom every year, so they're perennial flowers. From late May-ish, so end of spring, toward mid-August, so kind of late summer, early fallish almost time. The highest time you'll see most of the flowering is in June, and they are very dependent on new sand deposits within the floodplain. So they're what's called a pioneer species. So the last species we talked about with the flies is a flagship species, sometimes they call it, because it's kind of leading the way in conservation efforts for the rest of the habitat. In this case, these are pioneer species, which means they're some of those first species that kind of arrive and start to grow within this kind of sandy riverside habitat after it's flooded. So it's flooded, it's kind of cleared away some of the plants. These are some of those first ones that come in, and then other plants will eventually kind of take over once the habitat has gone beyond those first kind of initial after the flood times.
Now, what are those little things that are...
The white things?
Mm-hmm.
So these flowers, let me just make sure I've got this somewhere.
I love the color. It's so pretty. It's so bright.
Okay, so these flowers have special parts to them that hold the pollen and that will collect the pollen on them. So those taller white parts that kind of have the more dense like things at the tops of them that kind of look like this and are spread out around that the middle and the outside of the middle ring of the flower, those are going to be holding the pollen at the tops of them. And then the very little middle part of the flowers, I think you can kind of see it on that bottom, kind of bottom center right flower. You can see there's like a little white piece sticking up through the very middle. That's going to be collecting the pollen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So these are what's called dicots, angiosperms, eudicots. These are just all terms for them being flowering plants, as well as the fact that they've got branched leaves and things like that. They also are going to have those what are called male and female parts of the flowers that both hold the pollen and then collect the pollen. And then eventually that pollen is going to, if it lands on the pollen collecting female parts of the flower, it's going to develop a seed, and then that seed or those seeds are going to eventually be able to hopefully produce more flowering plants later.
On average, like how long do they stay alive for?
They're going to stay alive only about up to 5 years or so, but they are perennials, so they'll flower each year up until that kind of 5-year mark. Again, they're dependent on that initial after the flood condition in the soil to be able to initially start growing. Once that part of the habitat has gone past that mark, it's usually starting to develop other plants that kind of compete it, so that it's not as able to just be there. They mainly are going to reproduce by the pollination from various things. Some of the main pollinators, like I said, are the giant flower-loving fly, the sphinx moth. There are also a couple bee species, at least one of them is a bumblebee, and then a couple hummingbird species as well. And those ones with the longer tongues, the sphinx moth, the flower-loving fly, and the hummingbirds are going to be able to get any nectar down on the inside. But the bees and some of those other things are still able to get the pollen. And for something to be a pollinator, usually for a specific flower, it's going to be successfully moving pollen from flower to flower onto some of those flower collecting parts. So those insects and birds, hummingbirds specifically here, that have the longer tongues are going to be coming in closer to get that nectar down in the flower, and as they do that, they wipe some of the pollen on their face or whatever part of their body is closest to the pollen holding male parts of the flower, and then they go to another flower, and as they do that, some of that falls off onto the female collecting pollen collecting part of the flower, and that's how they pollinate them. A lot of flowers are going to be utilizing that method of pollination. Some things like grasses are actually wind pollinated usually, so they're not going to require pollinators, but for these flowers specifically, they do require pollinators for their seeds. When they do develop seeds, they're going to have, let's see, let me specify here. So when they produce flowers, we'll back up a little bit. When they produce flowers, each plant's usually going to produce about 4 to 30 flowers. Each flower is going to develop fruit, which is basically just a seed holding capsule. And then within each fruit, you're going to have 6 to 33 seeds. So you could get a lot of seeds per fruit, per flower, per plant, but those seeds are going to be dependent on if there's going to be soil for them to end up in, and if there's going to be rainfall that's going to activate their germination, or they're becoming changing into seed stage where they're able to actually start putting out roots and shoots that are going to spread out into the soil, and then eventually up. Those shoots will come up through the soil out into the open. If you think of chia, you know how chia, when it gets wet, it gets kind of like gelatinous almost, or what you think of, like you put it in and then it kind of spreads out within the water. These seeds are going to be similar. So they require that first major rainfall that comes in the fall at the end of their kind of seeding period. The seeds will come off. They will start to get kind of mucilaginous, they call it, or like they've got a mucus almost around them, a gelatinous type thing around them, and that coating is going to actually enable them to stick to the soil, and that enables them to have a spot kind of that they're anchored, so that they can start to germinate and put their roots and shoots on.
They're like, I'm staying here.
I'm staying in this part of the soil right here. Most of the seeds are going to drop within about a foot of the plant. Some may not even leave the fruit. And if they don't, then they may actually stay on the fruit or on the plant for several years.
Wow.
There have been ones that they found that were still on the plant several years later. They all need the right conditions from that rainfall from the soil and such for them to even be able to be transported or to begin to grow. Some of them will also be carried away by the floodwaters that come with the heavy rain in the fall. Their main threats within the Santa Ana River have to do with habitat alteration. So we've talked in some of our previous videos for the county at-risk species about people kind of doing stuff with water. We mentioned there are some reservoirs within the Valley region, and some of those, specifically the Seven Oaks Dam area, has done some altering of water systems for the Santa Ana River, and that's affected the woolly star habitat to some extent and made it a little harder for some of those plants to continue to persist in that habitat or parts of the habitat. You've also got issues with off-highway vehicle activity, so with each of the other regions we've talked about, we've had that as an issue. So off-roading vehicles or things like that, finding new places to ride that aren't actually designated trails for that sort of thing, and that a lot of times will affect some of these plant and animal species that require that sort of soil or ground space for growing or caring for young or storing food or things like that, finding protection. And when some of these vehicles come over them, then they will squish the plants. They will also compact the soil, which makes it hard for the roots to grow or for the seeds to find a place to anchor themselves, or for water to permeate or soak down into the ground and things of that nature, and that does alter the habitat to some degree. You've also got mining practices, agriculture, urban sprawl, development of the land for housing or businesses or things like that. Things like climate change have also been known to affect that, so longer drought, less rain, less opportunities for flooding in that region. That's going to initiate that first growth, as well as hybridization, so the mixing of species between this and some other woolly stars has also kind of messed with this specific genetic population.
Wow. I'm just amazed at how many single little flowers are all in a whole, like, I don't know, cluster.
Yeah. So 4 to 30, it says that one obviously is going to have closer to 30.
Mm-hmm.
Probably has some other stems nearby that have more flowers on them as well.
Wow. So pretty. I could make a full bouquet with just that.
Their stems are going to be light gray-green, and they're... Yeah. Unfortunately, killing or possessing these plants is prohibited under California Endangered Species Act. So you probably won't be able to have them in a bouquet unless they're fake. But they are pretty. Maybe have a painting made of them. But yes, they are very lovely. You may or may not have ever seen them before because they are only found in the Santa Ana River watershed area. But they are quite lovely. They are endemic, so we've used that term several times for some of these species of plants and animals. They are only found here in this part of our region. They are fine with areas that have a lot of sun, that are open, don't have a lot of other plants. Like I said, they're pioneer species, so they do better when there aren't as many plants to compete with for water and nutrients in the sandy soil they grow in. These areas that don't get a lot of floods but do get floods are ideal for them. They require some flooding for new soil to be deposited, and that enables them to continue to grow new plants from their seeds, as well as enables those seeds to be able to actually kind of anchor themselves, stick themselves to the soil. There used to be some of these in Orange County, so where the Santa Ana River goes through San Bernardino County, Riverside County, and then eventually into Orange County and out toward the ocean. They use these flowering plants used to be in Orange County, but they've been what's called extirpated. Everyone say it together.
Extirpated.
Yes, I said say it together. Say it together. There we go. Extirpated. So that means they are extinct from that exact space. Now, they're not fully extinct as a species, but they have been pretty much wiped out from that location, so they're called extirpated. Because of the degradation of their habitats, mainly due to agricultural and urban or suburban development, as well as the changes to the way kind of water was flowing over those habitats. Any final questions before we move on to our final one that Josh has started on?
No, I think the questions that I did have, other than it being like aesthetically pleasing to the eye, was pretty much what you went over. Was any of the questions that I did have, you answered. So, yes.
Those flowers are, unlike the flower fly, they do have about a little over 1,500 acres of native habitat that are preserved currently, and so they've got some space that is protected, but there are still areas where there are conflicts and things that I mentioned before. We're going to move on to our final one. This is the San Bernardino kangaroo rat, and Josh has begun drawing the little guy. Why is it called a kangaroo rat, you might ask? Well, if you look closely at the picture, I don't know if Josh can bring it there.
Does it jump?
He's got a large back set of hind legs.
Does he have any middle?
He does have front feet,
Very
but they
small.
are smaller little legs.
Jumps.
They
It
don't have
jumps.
creepy fingers like Josh just did. And they've got a long tail in the back to help with balance, and they will kind of hop or scurry on the ground, but those hind feet definitely help for that. They have also been known to use those big hind feet to stomp on the ground and do Morse code to send, well, obviously not Morse code, but to send a coded signal to other kangaroo rats nearby, potentially to let them know that they're predators or things like that, stay underground, something's coming. But yeah, they'll use those feet to help them get around as well as to communicate things, utilizing the vibrations they make when they hit the ground. Some species of rabbits or hares, I think, will also do that. There may be other animals as well that kind of...
It looks so
Utilize
cute.
Yes, he's a cute little guy. I'll start kind of with their physical characteristics. They are faintly yellowish tinted. They've got fur all over. They've got some dusky brown above and some white underneath them. So you'll see that on that foot, as well as like the underside has some white as well. They have a long tail with a white side stripe. You may not see it as much in this picture, but they do have a white side stripe on that long tail. And then they've also got kind of whiter dark stripes and a tufted tip that's kind of dark. You can kind of see that on that picture. They have a dark line on either side of their nose. So this one you can't really see it well, but kind of near where the whiskers are on either side of their nose, there's a dark kind of stripe that goes on the side of the face. It is the smallest kangaroo rat in the US, so cool. We've got some of the largest flies and some of the smallest kangaroo rats in the valleys alone. They can grow about 9 inches in length from the tip of the tail to the nose. So if you take out the tail, they're smaller than that. They have long hind legs with 4 toes on each, so that's one of the things that makes the difference between this type of kangaroo rat, which is a subspecies of the Merriam's kangaroo rat, and other types of kangaroo rats. Pretty much all of the Merriam's kangaroo rats only have 4 toes on their hind feet, whereas some of the other ones might have 5. But like I said, this is a subspecies, so it has some slight differences in physical characteristics, and it's the smallest type.
Does it jump?
They might kind of hop around a little
Cute.
bit on those big hind legs. They eat seeds and things of that nature, so they're not going to necessarily be going after insects or prey like that. They're mainly going to be herbivores, eating seeds.
Now, are they poisonous if someone tries to touch it?
Like other rodents, they probably are able to carry diseases or pathogens on their bodies, so you probably don't want to just go up and be like, oh, like touch it.
I'm gonna take you as my pet.
Yeah, no taking as pets. They are endangered species, both according to the federal government and the state of California.
And according to them.
Never mind.
So
Sorry.
don't go up to them and start chasing them and trying to pick them up. These ones do have teeth, and you don't want those teeth in your skin. For the same reason
Definitely not.
you don't want other wild animals' teeth in your skin.
Yikes.
But they are cute little guys. They live mostly in what are called alluvial fan sage scrub areas. So that's an area, if you were to look at it kind of from above, an aerial view, it's where there's sediment that's kind of spread out in a fan shape coming down either from a canyon or side of a mountain or hill or something like that. So you'll get some of those. Similarly in river and flood plains within San Bernardino County. So some of the same species, same ecosystem conditions that we saw for the Santa Ana River woolly star, you'll see also for these guys. They are mainly confined to areas like Santa Ana Wash, Cajon and Lytle Creeks, Plunge Creek, City Creeks, and areas west of Rialto, kind of near the Harupa Hills area, or the Harupa Hills. So they're not in a lot of places, but they're mainly in those areas with the sediment that's kind of fanned out from either the hills or the wash or the creek or the etc.
Now, is their tail really long?
Yes, their tail is quite long, as you can see there. It's probably the majority of their length of their body is that tail. That's why when I said they're 9 inches long, that's including the tail. Without the tail, they're probably several inches shorter. Let's see. Body length is about 3.7 inches on average. So almost 4 inches, not quite, and then you've got the almost 5-inch tail. So the tail's longer than the body itself, and then you combine it together, you get about 9 inches or so.
Are they all the same shade of color, or do they have are they
there
a
may
little
be
bit
a little
different?
variation for this subspecies. It has those colors I initially listed off, so kind of yellowish tinted fur with some dusky brown on the top and then white on the bottom. They've got some kind of white and black stripes on the tail going into a dark tuft at the end, and they've got those kind of black lines coming off the stripes coming off the nose.
Do they eat anything in particular, like
mainly seeds and things they'll find around their habitat, so seeds from some of the flowering plants probably or other plants that are around them. They will bounce or hop like we talked about to get places instead of fully scurrying like other animals or mice might or rats. They are quite adapted to the flood cycles that like Santa Ana River and some of those creeks and places that I mentioned they live in will experience, as well as some parts of the valley that are a little more desert-like. They pretty much only get their moisture from the food that they eat. So instead of going up and like drinking water, they're getting most of their water from the seeds and things they eat, which is pretty crazy and cool. That is one of their special adaptations or characteristics that enables them to survive in habitats like ours in the valley, where we may or may not get a lot of rain, especially in the summertime. And that's pretty much their only water sources, those seeds. Some of the main threats are going to include things like dams that are holding back some of the water that comes through and provides the plants that they depend on with water, as well as mining for gravel or sand, which is part of what makes up the habitat that they live in, as well as urban sprawl, like we've talked about before, suburban sprawl, that kind of spreading out into other areas that the city or town wasn't initially in, but as more people come, the population increases, the demand for housing or various businesses and things increases, then you kind of spread out into the surrounding habitats and areas, which in this case is affecting the alluvial fan
happens to me all the time.
sage scrub communities as well as our floodplains and river areas. There are only 3 remaining main places that support this type of population, and I included a couple of those kind of spots along the area. There are also some water development projects closer to the San Jacinto River Channel area that have also affected some of those populations. They are burrowing, so like some of our desert dwelling animals that we talked about, our ground squirrels in the Mojave Desert, our desert tortoises in the Mojave Desert, as well as our rubber boas in the mountain region. These are also burrowing animals. They are nocturnal, so they're actually, unlike the flower-loving fly that we said was probably more diurnal, active in the daytime, these are going to be nocturnal, so they'll mainly be active at night, likely going to give them a little better chance against predators like some of those hawks and bigger birds and things like that are going to be out in the daytime. And they're small, like we said. They are active year-round, and they're smaller than other kangaroo rats, a lot darker than many of them. They are...
Anytime she says kangaroo rat, I think of like them like jumping really high.
They do bounce. I don't know that they jump super high compared to kangaroos and things like that, but they aren't the biggest.
Do they stay within within a group when they travel or anything like that, or they kind of just like travel by themselves?
I think they mainly live as a family unit. They don't move around a lot because they have a burrow that kind of holds them in a spot similar to the tortoises and ground squirrels. They may move around a lot to get food, but they're mainly coming from a home-based burrow, going out and then coming back to provide food for themselves and their young. Right. Usually when they do breed, it's going to be between January and November. They're not going to breed kind of in the winter, some of the winter time. And then when they do have babies, they're going to have a litter. If you think of like a dog or cat will have a litter, they've got a litter of about 2 or 3 little rats that they will take care of in their burrows.
Their burrows. 10. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. They may spread out to, as far as food goes, they may spread out to green parts of plants or insects if they especially have to. But part of that is going to depend on the season that they're in. If there's a lot more of those seeds available, they'll depend more on those. But they may have to depend on some of the other things if those seeds aren't available or developed yet.
Wow. And they're so small compared to their long tail. Like, is there any other feature that kind of just sets them apart from if you just saw a regular rat? I don't know, but it kind of looks like a mouse.
Yeah. So the main things, like I said, they are pretty small, so they could be mistaken for a mouse. The main things are going to be that tail with the dark tuft on the end.
Oh, okay.
That's longer than the length of just their body. And then they have the long legs or long feet and legs that are going to set them apart as well from any other mouse or rat because they've got the big ones. Yeah, and then these specifically will have some of those kind of counter shading of darker on the top, lighter on the bottom, with the little stripes near the nose.
I like the little nose. He's so cute. You see, when I was looking more at the picture, in the background setting, it looks like the leaf is like the pattern in the face, but it's just the picture. And so I was like, oh, it's like different. Like, that's so cute. But it's just the pattern of like the leaf. I like how different the tail is though. Is it like a soft
Yeah, it's fur.
It's fur.
Yeah,
Okay.
so you have the main tail, and then you've got the tuft of fur at the very end.
Oh,
Kind of like a little
nice.
brush.
Cute.
Kind of.
And
Longer fur on the tuft over here.
do different animals tend to eat them?
Yeah, so they'll probably be prey for nocturnal animals like
Yeah.
owls or things of that nature.
And that's when they tend to.
Yeah, they're most active at night.
Okay.
During the daytime, they may be awake, but they're not going to be usually out and about getting food and stuff like that overground, like they would be at night, and that makes them more so prey for those animals that are awake at night. Potentially some of the crepuscular animals, so those are the ones we mentioned, I believe before, that crepuscular animals are ones that are most active at dawn and dusk. So for these, they're going to be potentially early prey, or if they're awake earlier in the nighttime, they may kind of overlap with some of those animals that are still awake from the crepuscular kind of sunrise, sunset, or sunset specifically time. And then if they're awake later in the night, they may kind of overlap with those animals that are awake at dawn. So they could be prey for things like coyotes, potentially, but also some of those nocturnal things like owls or things of that nature.
So cute.
They are pretty small, so if they are prey for something bigger, it's going to be basically a tiny snack. Unless they get the whole burrow, because they're not very big.
I don't know, but they kind of look like a little mouse. But it's just a different little family.
Mm-hmm. Any final things about this guy?
One last question. I think you answered all the questions I did previously have, but do they just come in that specific size, or are there different types of
There are different
sizes?
types of kangaroo rats. This specific San Bernardino kangaroo rat is a very specific species and a specific subspecies. So within the kangaroo rat family, you have a genus or group of them called the Merriam's kangaroo rats.
Mm-hmm.
And then even within that, you've got a bunch of subspecies that are slightly different from each other, and then these are like the specific subspecies of the San Bernardino kind. So their scientific name doesn't just have the genus and the species name, like we've talked about previously, Dipotamus merriami. It's also got parvis, which is the subspecies name. It's got 3 names.
Wow.
Just like pretty much both of the other ones as well.
Okay,
Yeah, all 3 of our species today have 3 names to their scientific names because they're subspecies of a species.
Some of them are really long names.
Yep, to recap, they are the Delhi Sands flower-loving fly, whose species scientific name is Rhaphiomydis terminatus abdominalis.
That's long.
And then the Santa Ana River woolly star, which was our flowering plant, and it was Eriastrum densifolium sanctorum. And then our final one was the San Bernardino kangaroo rat, whose scientific name was Dipotamus merriami parvis.
I've heard that before.
Maybe. They're major threats to their habitats, as well as just some of the other habitats within this valley region include alterations to hydrology, so the water systems, mainly through flood control or diversion of water for agriculture, urban or suburban use, things of that nature, residential watering of properties, things like that, as well as undesignated or illegal use of off-highway or off-road vehicles, and those activities that go along with that, soil compaction, the nitrification of soil, meaning you're getting nitrogen added to it, usually because of use of chemicals treating lawns or things like that, as well as agricultural practices. You've got drought, wildfire, climate change related other issues that will often lead to increased droughts or extreme heat. You've also got pesticide, herbicide use, native plant disruption or damage, invasive species coming in and out-competing the native plant or animal species, or being predators for some of those native animals, or eating up the plants. You also have pathogens, so things like diseases and viruses that are introduced, often coming on some of those invasive species. Just the loss of species over time, increased erosion of the sand. A lot of these species we just talked about are dependent on some of those sandy, gravelly, or fine sand habitats, and if you get erosion, some of that soil is going to be moving to a new place, and now you're stuck with whatever was beneath it, or some of the smaller soils that are going to come through that aren't as easy for the plants to grow in, or the food sources for the other animals to get. Final things, pollution. So soil pollution, water pollution, air pollution, sound pollution, light pollution, all these things that you kind of get with being in an area with a lot of suburban or urban spaces, as well as development of residential areas, industrial areas, commercial areas, mining and other resource extraction. We talked about places where they're taking soil or sand for mining, and that takes away some of the habitat, as well as human-wildlife conflict, trampling of soil from cattle, or overgrazing of some of the plant species, vandalism, and vehicular strikes, so where vehicles, in this case, more likely are going to be hitting your flower flies as well as your little kangaroo rats.
So cute. And I love the drawings.
So what are some things we can do to help them? Picking up trash or removing graffiti, always good things to do, especially if you're thinking of areas that get floods and rivers coming through. Those are going to carry some of those things downstream and affect habitats downstream from where they initially get dropped. Avoiding or reducing human-wildlife conflicts, so finding ways to help out animals so that we're not in conflict with them, either in our neighborhoods or things like that. Maintaining trails, helping to control the amount of erosion happening in our river watershed areas, utilizing our designated highways, roads, or trails. So for pedestrians, making sure we're staying on the trail or on the road, not going off-road and trampling all of the habitat, as well as utilizing off-road vehicles in designated areas so we're not compacting soil and causing some of those issues for burrowing animals, or even for the flower-loving fly larvae that are under the ground. Providing migration corridor linkages, so or just spaces around roads where animals can kind of travel underneath roads so that they're not getting hit. Private landowners being willing to maybe make some changes to what they do in their land to help these habitats, especially things like the flower-loving fly that is pretty much only on private land, finding ways to negotiate with landowners to increase conservation, but also to help them out with what they're trying to do. And then monitoring habitats and increasing research, community engagement, advocacy, conservation work associated with that, and then being a participant in citizen science, things like iNaturalist or other projects, even research projects people are doing in the Inland Empire that you can be a part of as a member of the general public, being able to share your observations with people and maybe even helping with their research of these species, which is pretty cool.
Wow.
Any final things you guys have you want to include?
Not that I can think of.
I think I pretty much any of the questions that I did have, I now feel like I'm informed. I love the pictures and just all the knowledge that I was able to understand that I didn't know before. So, thank you, Grace.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Grace.
And thank you, Josh, for all those beautiful pictures, brother. You did great.
It's fun.
We're both really very talented.
Thank you for joining us and asking beautiful questions and being a very beautiful face.
Thank
A very beautiful soul.
you.
No,
You guys are both beautiful souls. But thank you
you
guys
for
so
being
much for watching.
beautiful viewers.
Thank you for watching beautiful people. And thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys for sticking with us. If you haven't seen the previous videos, feel free to check them out. They are on some of the other regions you find within this county. And yeah, we enjoyed getting to share some of these species with you. Feel free to leave comments on this video, and we'll try to do some other biology art streams sometime in the future, but this will conclude, at least for now, our highlighting of some of the endangered and threatened species found within this county.
So yes, leave a like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more, because there will be more coming.